My name is Dorothy Wilson, and at 68 years old, I never imagined my only son Jeffrey would look me in the eyes and say those cutting words. We don't have space for you. Get out. His face was cold, unrecognizable as the boy I raised with such love. What he didn't understand as I walked away with a strange smile on my face was that I had been testing him all along. The inheritance I'd kept secret was about to change everything for both of us. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you're watching from today. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss how my son lost everything the very next day. I was married to my wonderful Howard for 42 years before cancer took him from me 3 years ago. We had a modest but comfortable life in our little 2-bedroom house in Mapleton. Howard worked as an electrical engineer, and I was an elementary school teacher until I retired at 60. We never had much in terms of luxury, but we had enough. Our greatest pride was our son Jeffrey, our only child born after years of trying. When Howard passed away, the loneliness that followed was something I couldn't have prepared for. The house that once felt cozy became an empty shell echoing with memories. Every corner held a moment with Howard that would never happen again. The dining table where we shared thousands of meals suddenly seemed too large for just me. His reading chair in the living room remained untouched for months because I couldn't bear to see someone else sitting there. Even myself. The financial strain came soon after. Howard had medical insurance, but it didn't cover all the experimental treatments we desperately tried in his final year. I sold my car and some jewelry, but it wasn't enough. The medical bills kept piling up, and my teacher's pension only stretched so far. After 18 months of struggling to keep up with payments, I made the heartbreaking decision to sell our home. Jeffrey had always been a bright, ambitious child. I still remember how proud Howard and I were when he graduated from college with a business degree. He was the first in our family to do so. He started small in real estate, but his natural charm and sharp mind helped him climb quickly. By 30, he was managing his own development projects. When Jeffrey met Kimberly at a charity function, I was genuinely happy for him. She was beautiful, sophisticated, and seemed to adore him. Their wedding 10 years ago was elaborate, far more extravagant than anything Howard and I could have afforded for ourselves. In the beginning, Kimberly was warm toward me. She would call occasionally to check in and send thoughtful birthday cards. But after the first few years, that warmth began to cool noticeably. My grandchildren became my greatest joy. Tyler, now 12, inherited Howard's mechanical mind and could take apart and reassemble almost anything electronic. Ashley, 9, was artistic and sensitive, always drawing pictures for her Grammy as she called me. They were the lights of my life after Howard was gone. Jeffrey's success in real estate development brought him wealth I could hardly comprehend. Their 5-bedroom house in Lakewood Hills had a swimming pool, home theater, and rooms I wasn't even sure what to do with. Kimberly drove a sleek white Mercedes SUV that cost more than Howard and I had paid for our house 20 years ago. Their vacations to Europe and tropical islands were documented extensively on Kimberly's social media, which I awkwardly navigated just to see glimpses of my grandchildren's lives. As my financial situation worsened, I became increasingly anxious about my future. The money from selling the house wouldn't last forever, especially with rents being so high. I looked for part-time work, but opportunities were scarce for someone my age. I tried not to think about asking Jeffrey for help. I had always been independent and hated the idea of becoming a burden. But after months of searching for affordable senior housing and coming up empty, I finally swallowed my pride and called my son. "Of course you can stay with us, Mom," Jeffrey had said, though I detected a slight hesitation in his voice. "We have plenty of room. It'll be temporary, until you find a place of your own." At the time, his words gave me such relief. I had no idea what awaited me in that beautiful house, or how quickly plenty of room would become, "We don't have space for you." The day I arrived at Jeffrey and Kimberly's house, my old Honda Civic looked painfully out of place in their circular driveway. Jeffrey helped carry my 2 suitcases and a few boxes, all that remained of my life with Howard. Kimberly greeted me at the door with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Welcome, Dorothy," she said, giving me a brief hug that felt mechanical. "We've set up the guest room in the basement for you. It's the most private space in the house." The basement. Despite the tasteful decoration and expensive furnishings, it was still a basement, dark, with small windows near the ceiling that let in minimal natural light. The guest room itself was small, especially compared to the spacious bedrooms upstairs. A queen bed took up most of the space, leaving just enough room for a dresser and small desk. The attached bathroom was clean but dated compared to the recently renovated bathrooms on the main floors. "This will be perfect," I said, hiding my disappointment. "Thank you for making space for me." I began unpacking my things, carefully arranging Howard's photograph on the nightstand. As I was organizing my clothes in the dresser, Kimberly appeared in the doorway. "Dorothy, I hope you don't mind, but we don't really have storage space for all those boxes. Maybe you could consider donating some of those old things? You won't need winter coats and boots until the fall anyway." I nodded and smiled, though these old things were precious mementos of my life. The winter coat she referred to was one Howard had given me on our 30th anniversary. From the beginning, I was determined to make myself useful. I woke early each morning to prepare breakfast before Jeffrey left for work. The first few days he seemed pleasantly surprised to find fresh coffee and a proper breakfast waiting. "Mom, you don't have to do this," he said, though he happily ate the French toast I'd made. "I want to help out while I'm here," I replied. "It's the least I can do." I soon established a routine of cooking, cleaning, and helping with laundry. The grandchildren were delighted to have me there, especially when I made Howard's famous chocolate chip pancakes on weekends, or helped with homework after school. Tyler would eagerly show me his latest science projects, while Ashley and I spent hours drawing together at the kitchen table. Kimberly, however, grew increasingly irritated by my presence. She would redo tasks I had already completed, rearranging the dishwasher I had loaded or refolding laundry I had already folded. "I have a specific system," she would say dismissively. "It's just easier if I do it myself." About 3 weeks after I moved in, I overheard the first argument about me. I was reading in my room when Jeffrey and Kimberly's voices drifted down the stairwell. "How long is she planning to stay?" Kimberly's sharp tone carried clearly. "I don't know. She's looking for a place, but it takes time," Jeffrey responded, his voice lower. "It's been almost a month, Jeff. I can't deal with having your mother underfoot all the time. She's constantly in the kitchen, always around the kids. What do you expect me to do? She's my mother. She has nowhere else to go. Figure something out." This was supposed to be temporary. After that night, I noticed Jeffrey beginning to avoid me. He left for work earlier, came home later, and spent weekends golfing or meeting clients. When we did cross paths, his responses to my questions became increasingly short. The warm conversations we once had about his childhood or Howard's silly jokes faded into brief, practical exchanges about household matters. Meanwhile, Kimberly's spending habits became increasingly apparent. Delivery trucks arrived almost daily with shopping bags from luxury stores. She had a standing weekly appointment at an expensive salon for hair, nails, and other treatments I couldn't identify. One evening, I glimpsed a credit card statement on Jeffrey's desk showing a single shopping trip that cost more than my monthly pension. I tried desperately to connect with my son during this time. I would save newspaper articles I thought might interest him or prepare his favorite meals from childhood. Once I baked Howard's secret recipe apple pie, hoping to spark memories of happier family times. "Remember how your father always said this pie could solve world peace?" I joked as I served a slice to Jeffrey. He barely looked up from his phone. "Sure, Mom. Thanks for the pie." The only bright spots were my grandchildren, who seemed oblivious to the tension. Ashley would crawl into my lap in the evenings for story time, and Tyler still wanted me to quiz him on math facts before tests. Their genuine affection was a balm to my increasingly wounded heart. "Grammy, why don't you live upstairs with us?" Ashley asked innocently one afternoon. "The basement is special, sweetheart," I answered carefully. "It's like having my own little apartment. But it's dark down there. And Mommy says we have to be quiet because you're old and need lots of rest." Out of the mouths of babes, as they say. I learned more about my standing in the household from these innocent comments than from any adult conversation. By the 3-month mark, the atmosphere in the house had become unbearably strained. What began as subtle coldness had transformed into open hostility, particularly from Kimberly. Her passive-aggressive comments had evolved into direct criticism. "Dorothy, did you use my special face wash again? It costs $70 a bottle, you know. I hadn't touched her face wash, but apologizing had become my default response.
I'm sorry, Kimberly.
I must have confused it with something else. The family dynamic shifted dramatically during this period. Family outings no longer included me. I would come upstairs on Saturday mornings to find the house empty, only to learn later they had gone to brunch or to the children's sporting events. When I asked why I hadn't been invited, Jeffrey would shrug uncomfortably. We didn't want to bother you, Mom. We thought you'd prefer to rest. Rest. That word again. At 68, I wasn't exactly ready for the grave, but they treated me as if I were infirm. Jeffrey's resentment grew more obvious daily. He would sigh heavily when I asked simple questions or roll his eyes when I mentioned needing a ride to the pharmacy. The gentle, thoughtful son I had raised seemed to have disappeared, replaced by a man who viewed his mother as an inconvenience. One evening, as I was preparing to join them for dinner, Kimberly appeared at my door. Dorothy, we're having some colleagues of Jeffrey's over tonight. Would you mind staying down here? We've ordered enough for exactly 8 people, and another place setting would throw off the table arrangement. I nodded, feeling the sting of rejection. Of course. I understand. Later that night, I could hear laughter and conversation from upstairs as I ate a sandwich alone in my room. Tyler snuck down briefly to see me. Grammy, why aren't you eating with us? Mr. Peterson asked where you were, and Mom said you weren't feeling well. The falsehoods hurt more than the exclusion. I was being erased from the family narrative, turned into an invalid who couldn't participate in normal activities. The situation worsened when I overheard Kimberly complaining about me to her friends during their weekly coffee gathering. I had come upstairs to get a glass of water, pausing when I heard my name. Dorothy is driving me crazy, Kimberly's voice carried from the living room. She's always there, watching everything I do. Jeff won't discuss senior living options because he feels guilty. But this arrangement isn't working. Can't she afford her own place? One friend asked. Apparently not. She spent all their savings on her husband's medical treatments. Poor financial planning, if you ask me. I retreated silently to my room, the water forgotten, my cheeks burning with humiliation. A particularly painful family dinner occurred about 4 months after I moved in. Kimberly had prepared an elaborate meal, and for once I was included. The conversation revolved around an upcoming luxury vacation to the Maldives. We've booked the overwater bungalow for 10 days, Kimberly announced excitedly. It's frightfully expensive, but you only live once, right? What about Mom? Tyler asked innocently. Is Grammy coming too? An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Grammy will stay here and watch the house, Jeffrey said finally. But she'll be all alone, Ashley protested. Kimberly's smile tightened. Dorothy is a grown woman. She'll be fine on her own for a while. The way they discussed me as if I weren't sitting right there at the table cut deeply. I had become an object, a problem to be managed, rather than a family member. The following week, I returned from a doctor's appointment to discover several of my personal items had been moved or were missing entirely. The quilt Howard's mother had made, which I kept folded at the foot of my bed, was gone. Some framed photographs had disappeared from the dresser. When I asked Kimberly about it, she looked annoyed. I put some things in storage. This is a guest room, Dorothy, not a permanent living space. It was getting cluttered. That evening, I overheard another heated argument between Jeffrey and Kimberly. I can't take it anymore, Jeff. You need to solve this problem. Find her a senior apartment, assisted living, anything. I want my house back. What do you expect me to do? We can't afford to subsidize an apartment for her right now, not with the new beach house down payment coming due. Then tell her she needs to figure something out. It's been months. I'm at my breaking point. Their voices lowered, but the message was clear. I had become a burden too heavy for them to bear, an obstacle to their luxurious lifestyle. In a last desperate attempt to ease tensions, I offered to contribute financially from my small pension. I can pay some rent, I suggested to Jeffrey one morning. It won't be much, but I want to help. He dismissed the offer immediately. Don't be ridiculous, Mom. It's not about money. But it was about money in ways neither of us fully understood yet. As I retreated to my basement room that evening, the weight of unwelcomeness pressing on my shoulders, I had no idea how dramatically our financial situations were about to change. The morning that everything fell apart began like any other. I woke early, made coffee, and started preparing breakfast. Kimberly came down in her silk robe, looking irritated when she saw me at the stove. "I've told you not to use those pans without the special silicone utensils," she snapped, gesturing to the spatula in my hand. "I'm sorry, I forgot," I said, though I was certain I was using the correct utensil. She huffed dramatically, opened the refrigerator, and then slammed it shut. "And you've used all the organic berries I bought specially for my smoothies." I hadn't touched her berries, but again I apologized. Tension filled the kitchen as I silently continued cooking while Kimberly aggressively made her smoothie, the blender noise feeling intentionally prolonged. After breakfast, I went to shower in my basement bathroom. I used the same towel I'd been using all week, hanging neatly on the rack each day as Kimberly had instructed to reduce laundry waste. When I emerged from the bathroom, I found Kimberly waiting, her face flushed with anger. "You used the guest towels," she accused, pointing to the light blue towel I had just hung up. "I've been using this towel all week," I explained calmly. "No, these blue towels are only for actual guests, not long-term residents. You're supposed to use the beige towels in the linen closet." This arbitrary distinction had never been mentioned before, but I nodded anyway. "I'm sorry for the confusion. I'll use the beige ones from now on." Instead of defusing the situation, my apology seemed to inflame her further. "This is exactly the problem. You don't respect the rules of this house. You treat this place like a hotel, using whatever you want without consideration." Her voice had risen to a shout, and I stood speechless at the disproportionate rage over a towel. Before I could respond, we heard the front door open upstairs. Jeffrey was home, unusually early for a Wednesday morning. "What's going on?" he called, coming down the stairs. I could hear shouting from the driveway. Kimberly immediately turned to him, tears springing to her eyes with remarkable speed. "I can't do this anymore, Jeff. I just can't. Your mother deliberately uses things I've asked her not to touch. She's constantly in the way, and now she's being disrespectful." Jeffrey looked between us, his expression hardening as he focused on me. "What did you do now, Mom?" The now stung sharply. When had I become someone who repeatedly caused problems? "There was a misunderstanding about which towels to use," I explained quietly. Kimberly made a sound of exasperation. "It's not just towels. It's everything. The way she rearranges things in the kitchen, how she's always sitting in the living room when I want to have friends over, how she spoils the children with treats before dinner." Jeffrey's face flushed with anger. The dam that had been holding back months of resentment finally broke. "I've had enough of this, Mom. We've tried to make this work, but it's clearly not working. You can't just follow simple house rules. Do you have any idea what a strain this has put on our marriage? On our lives?" "Jeffrey," I began, my voice small. "I've tried my best to." "Your best isn't good enough," he shouted, cutting me off. "We've given you a place to stay for months now. We've fed you, housed you. And this is how you repay us? By causing problems every day." I stood stunned by my son's outburst. This man who once wouldn't raise his voice even when he was a teenager. "We have plans, Mom. We're trying to build a life here, and you're holding us back. We can't buy the beach house we want, because we're worried about you hanging around forever. We can't renovate the kitchen because you might be in the way." "I didn't realize I was such a burden," I whispered, tears forming despite my efforts to remain composed. "Well, you are," he said coldly. "We don't have space for you. Get out." The words hung in the air between us. My son, my only child, the baby I had nursed through fevers and taught to ride a bicycle, was throwing me out of his home. Kimberly stood behind him, a slight smile of satisfaction on her lips. "Jeffrey, please," I said, reaching for his arm. He stepped back as if my touch would burn him. "I mean it, Mom. Find somewhere else to go. Today." I looked into his eyes, searching for any trace of the loving son I had raised, but found only cold determination. Something shifted inside me in that moment. A realization that the test I had unconsciously been conducting was now complete. "All right," I said with unexpected calm. "I'll pack my things." I returned to my basement room and methodically began placing my belongings in the 2 suitcases I had arrived with. I folded each item carefully, my hands steady despite the earthquake happening in my heart. As I packed, I made sure to tuck away a special drawing Ashley had made for me, hidden securely in my purse where it wouldn't be found and confiscated. When I finished packing, I took one last look around the room that had been my reluctant home for the past few months. Howard's photograph smiled at me from the nightstand, and I picked it up, pressing it to my chest before placing it safely in my bag. Upstairs, Jeffrey was waiting by the front door, checking his watch impatiently. "Do you need me to call you a taxi?" he asked, his tone businesslike. "No, thank you. I'll manage," I replied. "Where will you go?" There was the briefest flicker of concern in his question, quickly extinguished. "Don't worry about me, Jeffrey. I'll be fine." As I walked toward the door with my suitcases, I paused and turned to face my son. And then, to his evident confusion, I smiled. "What's so funny?" he asked suspiciously. "Nothing," I said softly. "I just finally have clarity." I walked out of the house with my head held high, the strange smile still on my face. As the door closed behind me, I felt a curious mixture of devastating heartbreak and unexpected liberation. The test was over, and while my son had failed miserably, I now knew exactly what needed to be done. What Jeffrey didn't know as I walked away from his house that day was that I had been keeping a significant secret. 6 months before Howard passed away, when we knew his time was growing short, he had called me to his hospital bed one afternoon while he was briefly alone. "Dot," he said, using the nickname only he ever called me. "There's something I need to tell you about." He explained that early in our marriage, he had made a small investment in a friend's technology startup company. The investment was so modest that we had both forgotten about it over the years. The company had struggled for decades, nearly going bankrupt several times, which was why Howard never mentioned it again. Seemed like lost money. "The company finally sold," Howard told me, his tired eyes suddenly bright. "The patents were valuable to some big corporation. My original investment, it's worth something now." 3 months after Howard's funeral, his attorney Michael Thompson contacted me. The something turned out to be substantial, nearly $2 million after taxes. I was stunned. Howard had never been one for financial risks, but this long-forgotten investment had transformed our modest savings into a comfortable fortune. I kept the inheritance secret for several reasons. Primarily, I needed time to process this unexpected windfall while still grieving my husband. Additionally, I wanted professional financial advice before making any decisions. But as the months passed and my relationship with Jeffrey and Kimberly deteriorated, another reason emerged. I began to wonder about my son's character. The Jeffrey I raised had been compassionate, generous, and kind, qualities that seemed increasingly absent in the man he'd become. I found myself wondering, if he knew I had money, would his behavior toward me change? Would the son who couldn't find space for his struggling mother suddenly discover room in his home and heart for a wealthy one? It was never my intention to deceive him as a test, at least not initially. But as I observed his and Kimberly's lifestyle, their constant complaints about financial pressure despite their obvious luxury spending, I decided to wait. I would see how they treated me when they thought I had nothing to offer but familial love. The answer was now painfully clear. After leaving Jeffrey's house, I checked into a modest hotel a few miles away. Sitting on the edge of the unfamiliar bed, I finally allowed myself to cry, deep, wrenching sobs that came from the core of my being. The pain of rejection by my only child was almost physical in its intensity. When the tears finally subsided, I called Barbara Henderson, my dearest friend from my teaching days. "Dorothy." Her warm voice was immediately concerned. "What's wrong? You sound terrible." I explained what had happened, my voice breaking several times during the retelling. "That ungrateful, spoiled boy," Barbara said fiercely. "You're coming to stay with me right now. I'm sending Gary to pick you up." "No, Barb, I'm okay in the hotel for tonight. But thank you." "Not another word. Gary will be there in 30 minutes. The guest room is already made up." Barbara and Gary's comfortable home became my sanctuary for the next week. They asked no questions, simply provided friendship and support as I began to process my feelings and make plans. 3 days after moving in with them, I met with Patrick Donovan, the financial advisor who had been helping me manage Howard's unexpected legacy. In his downtown office with its sweeping views of the city, I explained my new circumstances. I think it's time I found a place of my own, I concluded. Something small but comfortable, where I can have my independence. Patrick nodded thoughtfully. The real estate market is actually quite favorable for buyers right now. With your financial position, you could purchase a lovely home outright. No mortgage necessary. We discussed options, locations, and price ranges. By the end of our meeting, Patrick had arranged for a real estate agent specializing in properties for seniors to contact me. During this week, I experienced the full spectrum of emotions about Jeffrey. There was crushing disappointment, of course, and a grief almost as profound as when I lost Howard. There was anger too, flashes of rage at how casually my son had discarded me when I became inconvenient. But I was determined not to let bitterness consume me. Howard had always said that resentment was like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. I would not poison myself with hatred for my son, regardless of his actions. Instead, I channeled my energy into building my new life. I met with Serena Mills, the real estate agent Patrick recommended, and explained exactly what I was looking for. Something cozy but not cramped. A small garden would be lovely. And most importantly, it needs to be in the Lakewood School District. Serena raised an eyebrow at this last requirement. That's quite an expensive area, Mrs. Wilson. The property taxes alone. I smiled. The price isn't an issue. I want to be close to my grandchildren. After viewing several properties, I fell in love with a charming cottage on Maple Street. It was smaller than Jeffrey's imposing house, but infinitely warmer. The kitchen had large windows overlooking a garden with mature fruit trees. The living room featured a stone fireplace that reminded me of vacations Howard and I had taken to mountain cabins. There were 2 bedrooms, one for me and one that could serve as both a guest room and a space for my grandchildren to stay. I purchased the cottage for cash, a concept that seemed to both delight and bewilder the real estate agents involved. As I signed the final papers, I felt a sense of calm purpose replacing the chaos of emotions from the previous weeks. This house would be the foundation of my new beginning. A place of peace, not pain. I hadn't heard from Jeffrey since the day he told me to leave. I wondered if he ever questioned where I had gone or if I was safe. Did he feel any remorse for his actions, or was he simply relieved to have solved his mother problem? What I didn't realize was that events were already in motion that would soon bring these questions to the surface in dramatic fashion. Jeffrey's carefully constructed world was about to collapse. And when it did, he would discover exactly what he had thrown away when he told me to get out. 1 week after I moved into my new cottage on Maple Street, the local business newspaper published a story that caught Barbara's attention. She called me immediately. "Dorothy, have you seen today's business journal? There's an article about Lakefront Developments facing bankruptcy proceedings." Lakefront Developments was Jeffrey's company. I felt a strange hollowness in my stomach as I asked Barbara to read me the article. According to the report, Jeffrey had leveraged his company heavily to invest in a massive luxury condominium project on reclaimed waterfront property. Environmental concerns and permit issues had delayed construction for months, while interest payments continued to mount. Now, several investors were pulling out, and the banks were calling in their loans. The article mentions that the CEO, Jeffrey Wilson, was unavailable for comment. Barbara finished. "Dorothy, did you know anything about this?" "No," I said quietly. Jeffrey never discussed his business troubles with me. Later that day, Gary brought over the newspaper, so I could read the full story myself. There was a photograph of Jeffrey leaving his office building, looking harried and tense. The man in the picture appeared older and more strained than the son I had last seen just days ago. Through Barbara's husband Gary, who worked in commercial banking and had connections throughout the financial community, I learned more details over the next few days. Jeffrey had apparently been making increasingly risky investments over the past 2 years, trying to expand his business too quickly. The waterfront development was supposed to be his crowning achievement. Luxury condominiums priced in the millions, with every imaginable amenity. He was overextended even before the environmental issues, Gary explained gently. The market's been showing warning signs for months, but from what I hear, he ignored all the red flags. I thought about the beach house they had been planning to buy, the kitchen renovation, Kimberly's endless shopping sprees. Had they really been so blind to their financial reality? 3 days after the newspaper article appeared, my phone rang with a number I immediately recognized. Jeffrey. I took a deep breath before answering. Hello. Mom. His voice sounded rough, as if he hadn't slept in days. Where are you? I've been trying to figure out where you went.
I'm fine, Jeffrey.
I found a place to live. Look, Mom, I need to talk to you. Can I come see you? I hesitated, my hand tightening around the phone. Why? Please, Mom. It's important. I gave him my address, wondering what this visit would bring. An hour later, his car pulled into my driveway. Not the sleek BMW he usually drove, but an older sedan I didn't recognize. When I opened the door, I barely recognized my son. Jeffrey looked as though he had aged 10 years in a week. His clothes were wrinkled, his face unshaven, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. Mom, he said, then stopped, taking in the cottage behind me. This is where you're living now? Yes. Please come in. His eyes darted around the cozy living room with its comfortable furniture and bright throw pillows. How can you afford this place? I gestured for him to sit down. Would you like some coffee, Jeffrey? Mom, I don't have time for coffee. I need to talk to you about something important. I sat in the armchair across from him, folding my hands in my lap.
I'm listening.
I'm in trouble, Mom. Big trouble. The words rushed out of him. The business is collapsing. The banks are calling in all their loans. We're going to lose everything. The house, the cars, everything. I nodded slowly. I read about your company in the paper. It's worse than what they reported. Much worse. He ran his hands through his disheveled hair. Mom, I need your help. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't absolutely necessary, but I'm desperate. What kind of help, Jeffrey? Money. The word seemed to pain him physically. I need a loan to keep the creditors at bay while I restructure. Just temporary. I'll pay you back, I swear. And where do you think I would get this money? I asked quietly. I don't know. Maybe you could take out a reverse mortgage on this place? Or maybe you have some savings from selling the house that you didn't tell me about. I looked at my son, this stranger who had thrown me out of his home a week ago, and was now sitting in mine asking for money. Jeffrey, I think you should manage with what you have, I said calmly. Learn to live within your means. His face flushed with anger. Mom, you don't understand. We're talking about my entire business, my reputation. Everything I've worked for. I understand perfectly, but I'm afraid I can't help you. Can't or won't. He snapped, the entitled man who had ejected me from his house suddenly reappearing. Both, I replied evenly. I don't have the kind of money you need, and even if I did, I wouldn't enable the kind of financial irresponsibility you've been practicing. He stood up, pacing the small living room. I can't believe this. My own mother won't help me when I'm about to lose everything. Where is Kimberly during all this? I asked. A shadow crossed his face. She's staying with her sister for a while. She needed space to process everything. I wasn't surprised. Kimberly had married Jeffrey for the lifestyle he provided. Without that, what was left? I'm sorry you're facing these difficulties, Jeffrey. Truly I am. But perhaps this is an opportunity for growth, for reassessing what really matters in life. I don't need a lecture, Mom. I need money. His voice was cold again, reminiscent of the day he told me to get out. Then I'm afraid I can't help you. He stared at me for a long moment, then grabbed his keys from the coffee table. Fine. I should have known better than to ask. As he reached the door, I called after him. Jeffrey, when was the last time you saw your children? He paused, his back to me. What? Tyler and Ashley. When did you last spend time with them, really talk to them? I don't see what that has to do with anything. It has everything to do with everything, Jeffrey. But you'll have to figure that out for yourself. After he left, I sat in my quiet living room feeling strangely calm. I had expected to feel vindicated or perhaps even pleased at Jeffrey's reversal of fortune. Instead, I felt only sadness for the lessons he was learning in such a painful way. Over the next few weeks, I watched from a distance as Jeffrey's life unraveled. Barbara, who had appointed herself my personal intelligence gatherer, kept me updated on the local gossip. Kimberly filed for separation, she reported during one of our regular coffee meetings. Apparently she cleared out their joint accounts before she left, and they've listed the house for sale, well below market value. They must be desperate for cash. I nodded, absorbing this information without comment. Aren't you going to say, "I told you so"? Barbara pressed. After how they treated you, they deserve what they're getting. No one deserves to suffer, Barb. Not even Kimberly. You're a better person than I am, Dorothy Wilson. 2 weeks after his first visit, Jeffrey appeared at my door again. This time he looked even worse, thinner, more haggard, defeat evident in every line of his body. "The house is being foreclosed," he said without preamble. "Kimberly's filing for divorce. She's demanding half of everything, but there's nothing left to divide." "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it. "The kids." His voice broke. "They don't understand what's happening. Ashley cries all the time asking when we can go home. Tyler won't even talk to me." I invited him in again, and this time he accepted the offer of coffee. "Where are you staying?" I asked as I poured him a cup. "A studio apartment downtown. It's all I can afford now." He looked around my cottage again. "Mom, I still don't understand. How did you manage to get this place? It's not fancy, but it's nice. Really nice." I sat down across from him, deciding it was time for truth. "Jeffrey, do you remember that investment Dad made years ago, with his college friend's startup company?" He frowned, thinking. "Vaguely. Some computer parts thing that never went anywhere. It went somewhere eventually. Shortly before Dad died, he told me the company had finally been sold. His investment matured into quite a substantial sum." Jeffrey's coffee cup froze halfway to his lips. "What? How substantial?" "Enough that I could buy this cottage outright. Enough that I've been financially secure all along." Realization dawned slowly on his face. "All along? Even when you were staying with us?" I nodded. "Even then. But why didn't you tell me? Why did you let us think you were broke?" "I didn't plan it that way initially," I explained. "But as time went on, I began to see it as a sort of test. I wanted to know if you would love and respect me for who I am, not what I could give you." The color drained from Jeffrey's face. "A test? You were testing me." "In a way. And Jeffrey, you failed. Spectacularly." He set down his coffee cup with shaking hands. "So all this time you could have helped with my business, bought your own place, everything?" "Yes. And now? You still have money." "Ido." Hope flared briefly in his eyes. "Then you could still help me. We could save the company, start over." I shook my head firmly.
No, Jeffrey.
"I won't use Dad's money to bail out your poor decisions. That's not why he worked so hard all his life." "But Mom, the money isn't important, Jeffrey. What matters is what I learned about you, about who you've become. The son I raised would never have treated his mother the way you treated me. He would never have valued material possessions over family." Jeffrey's face crumpled, years of carefully constructed facade finally collapsing. "I've made such a mess of everything. Kimberly, the business, the kids. You. Especially you." "Yes, you have," I agreed, not unkindly. "But making a mess doesn't have to be the end of the story. It can be the beginning of a new one." "How?" "I've lost everything." "Not everything. You still have yourself. Your children. And if you're willing to do the work to become the man I know you can be, you still have me." Jeffrey looked up, tears streaming down his face. "Why would you even want anything to do with me after what I did?" "Because I'm your mother. And while I won't enable your poor choices, I will always love you." For the first time in years, I saw a glimmer of my real son through the stranger he had become, vulnerable, humbled, and perhaps finally ready to learn what truly matters. 6 months passed, bringing changes as dramatic as the seasonal shift from winter to summer. My cottage on Maple Street had transformed from a simple dwelling into a true home. The garden flourished under my care, with roses climbing trellises and herbs spilling from window boxes. Inside, photographs of Howard mingled with new memories. Ashley's latest artwork, Tyler's science fair certificate, snapshots of Barbara and Gary visiting for dinner. Most significantly, my relationship with my grandchildren had deepened in ways I never could have imagined during those basement days. When Kimberly moved to Phoenix with her new boyfriend, leaving the children primarily with Jeffrey, a new routine developed naturally. Tyler and Ashley stayed with me every weekend, their presence filling my cottage with laughter, chaos, and joy. "Grammy, can we plant strawberries next spring?" Ashley asked one Saturday morning as we tended the garden together. "Of course we can, sweetheart. This is your garden too." Tyler, now 13 and increasingly thoughtful, looked up from the birdhouse he was building. "I like it better here than at Dad's apartment. It feels like a real home." Jeffrey's new life was a stark contrast to his former existence. The luxury house, expensive cars, and lavish lifestyle had vanished, replaced by a modest 2-bedroom apartment and a used Honda not unlike the one I had driven for years. He had found employment with a small development firm, starting over at a much lower position than he was accustomed to. The initial bitterness and resentment he felt about his financial collapse gradually gave way to something resembling acceptance. Our relationship remained fragile, built on cautious conversations and careful boundaries, but it was healing slowly. One evening in early autumn, Jeffrey came to pick up the children after their weekend stay. Usually he would wait in the car, texting when he arrived. This time he knocked on the door. "Can we talk, Mom?" he asked hesitantly. I invited him in, offering coffee which he accepted. We sat at my kitchen table, the late afternoon sunlight casting long shadows across the floor. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he began, "about everything that happened, about who I became." I remained silent, giving him space to continue. "I was so focused on appearing successful that I lost sight of what success really means. I treated you horribly, and I've been too ashamed to really address it. It hurt deeply," I acknowledged quietly. "I know, and I'm sorry, truly sorry. Not because of what I lost, but because I betrayed everything you and Dad ever taught me about how to treat people." His apology seemed genuine, without the undercurrent of self-interest that had colored our interactions immediately after his financial collapse. "I've been seeing a therapist," he continued, "trying to understand how I became someone who could throw his own mother out of the house. It's not easy looking at yourself that honestly." "No, it never is." She suggested I make amends, but honestly, I don't know if that's even possible after what I did. I considered his words carefully before responding. "Amends aren't made in a single conversation, Jeffrey. They're made through consistent actions over time, through becoming someone different than the person who caused the harm." He nodded slowly. "I'm trying to be that different person. For the kids, for myself, and for you if you'll let me." "I believe you are," I said. "I've seen changes in how you are with Tyler and Ashley. You're present with them in ways you weren't before." A small smile crossed his face. "They're amazing kids. I can't believe how much I was missing when I was working all those hours, chasing more and more money. That's part of the lesson in all this, isn't it?" "Yeah, an expensive lesson." He looked around my kitchen, at the cheerful curtains and the refrigerator covered with children's artwork. "Mom, there's something I've wanted to ask you for months now, but I've been afraid of the answer." "What is it?" "Why did you smile that day when I told you to get out? You smiled as you were leaving. I've never understood that." I hadn't thought about that moment in months, but the memory returned clearly. I smiled because in that terrible moment, I saw the truth clearly for the first time. I saw who you had become, who Kimberly was, and what I needed to do next. There was a strange kind of liberation in that clarity, even in the midst of so much pain. Jeffrey absorbed this, nodding slowly. "I need to tell you something else. Something I've been too embarrassed to admit." "Go on." "When you told me about Dad's investment, about the money you had all along, my first thought wasn't about how badly I had treated you. It was calculation. Thinking maybe I could still convince you to bail me out." He looked down at his hands. "That's when I realized how far I'd fallen, that even after everything, I was still thinking about what I could get from you." His honesty surprised me. "And now I'm just grateful you didn't give me the money. It would have been the worst thing for me. I needed to face the consequences of my choices." We talked for nearly 2 hours that evening, having the first truly honest conversation we'd shared in years. There were difficult moments, painful admissions, and tears on both sides. But underneath it all ran a current of possible redemption, not an erasing of past wrongs, but a pathway forward despite them. The following Sunday, I hosted the first family dinner in my cottage. Jeffrey arrived early to help prepare the meal, something he would never have done in his previous life. We worked side by side in my small kitchen, chopping vegetables and setting the table. "Dad, Grammy, look what I made." Ashley burst through the door, holding up a drawing of 3 figures in front of a small house. "It's us. Our family." Jeffrey knelt down to examine the picture. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. Is that Grammy's cottage?" "Uh-huh. And look, I drew you smiling." Tyler followed behind his sister, carrying a model rocket he'd been working on. "Dad, can we launch this in the park next weekend? Grammy already said she wants to come watch." "Absolutely," Jeffrey replied, ruffling his son's hair. A casual gesture of affection that would have been unthinkable months ago. As we gathered around my table that evening, I looked at our small, reformed family. We were not what we had been, and perhaps we were better for it. Jeffrey had lost his material wealth but was finding something more valuable. The grandchildren were more grounded, less entitled than they had been in their previous environment. And I had discovered strengths I never knew I possessed. Howard's unexpected legacy had indeed changed our lives, but not in the ways any of us could have predicted. The money had been merely a catalyst, forcing truths to the surface that might otherwise have remained hidden. After dinner, as Jeffrey helped clear the dishes, another new behavior. He paused beside me at the sink. "Mom, do you think Dad would be disappointed in how everything turned out? With me, I mean." I considered the question carefully. "I think he would have been heartbroken by some of your choices just as I was. But Howard always believed in redemption, in the possibility of change. He would be proud of the work you're doing now to become a better man, a better father." Jeffrey nodded, blinking back tears. "I miss him. I wish I could tell him I'm sorry for how I lost my way." "In a sense, you're telling him every day you choose to live differently." Later that evening, after Jeffrey and the children had gone home, I sat in my garden watching the sunset. I thought about the strange journey of the past year. From my basement exile to my cozy cottage, from rejection to the beginnings of reconciliation. The pain hadn't disappeared completely. There were still moments when I remembered Jeffrey's cold face as he told me to get out, still times when I wondered if our relationship could ever fully heal. But those moments no longer defined me or my future. Howard had always said that the true measure of wealth wasn't in bank accounts but in relationships. By that measure, I had lost and found fortune in equal measure. I had lost the illusion of who I thought my son was, but was finding the reality of who he could still become. I had lost a false sense of belonging in a house that was never my home, but gained genuine peace in a space that truly was. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, I whispered words I'd spoken countless times during my 68 years. "Howard, you wouldn't believe what happened today." In the gentle evening breeze, I could almost hear his familiar laugh in response. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice with a family member that tested your relationship? I'd love to hear your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more real-life stories about family, forgiveness, and finding strength in unexpected places. Remember, sometimes the most painful moments can lead to the most beautiful transformations. Thank you for listening to my story today.